everybody. Thank you for being here. It's a very exciting opportunity, and we have a very international panel. So thank you for taking the time to be here. I'm just going to say a few things about myself, not an awful lot, and about the event, and then about our speakers and how he's going to follow through the event. So hello and welcome to the York Festival of Ideas 2023. My name is it's Marta Herrero, and I'm based at the University of York. I'm senior lecturer in business and creative industries, therefore that's why I'm here. I'm also the head of creative industries management, which is a recognition of the university that they are investing heavily in both teaching and research on the creative industries. So I lead a program called Creative Industries Management. We also have a program called Music Marketing and Management, and we have a new program called Creative Industries and Artificial Intelligence. So things are moving forward quite a lot in that area. So on to today, I'm delighted to welcome our speakers for this session. The session is titled Research in UK and French Creative Industries. And the session is delivered as part of a York Festival of Ideas, but is a partnership with the French Embassy. So the French Embassy each year organize an event, and this year they have been particularly interested in us to be here to talk about the creative industries and to bring in speakers from both France and the UK, and this is what we are doing. Just put my glasses back on. So I will introduce each of the speakers in turn, and I'll ask them to spend around 5 minutes, and that's what they're going to do, telling us a little bit about their background and also the perspectives, how they work in the industry. And after that, we're just going to really have some discussion. So the idea is, I'm going to introduce the speakers. The speakers are going to give us 5 minutes on their ideas and their work and challenges and opportunities. And once all the speakers have given us their 5 minutes, then we're going to get questions from yourselves, from the audience, addressed to the speakers. And after that, we're going to have what is called a round table, or closing events, where we're all going to talk to each other about any ideas that have come up from the event. So I think this is all I had to say. So I'm going to start by introducing our first speaker. They're all lined up in order, so it's quite helpful. Our first speaker, it is my great pleasure to welcome Pierre Aumont, who is Head of Partnerships and Economic Development at Villa Creative in Avignon. So the Villa Creative is a new hybrid site for training, creation, innovation, experimentation and research. And it's going to open its doors, not in 2023, but in 2024. This is a unique place for meetings, sharing and collaboration, and it will bring together the worlds of academia, research and entrepreneurship around the University of Avignon's Culture, Heritage, Digital Societies and Specialization. So, prior to this, Pierre worked as a scientific advisor at Codex Innovation and managing director at TTOM, a digital manufacturing workshop and a design office, and also, you've been very busy, he was also president of Fab Lab in Lyon. And he also worked in business consulting at Alma GC in risk management, amongst other things. So I'm going to stop here, because you have a very long career trajectory, which is very interesting. And I'm just going to give you the microphone so that you can start.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you've got your own.
This one is okay? Okay, fine, thank you. Thank you. Okay, it's a lot of mysteries because I'm 50 years old. That's the reason. Thank you. As you see, I come from technological parts. I'm a scientist. I have a PhD in physics. So why am I here? It's because of culture and heritage. And there is things we like to cross. There is some crossroads between artist, educator, researcher, and art and science have to speak together. And I think that you will talk to us about this. In this new building, it's a building of the 19th century that will open in 2024. It's about 5,000 square meters. of space with a lot of common space. And it will work as honeypot. We want people to work together. So it's a place where there is some trap for people. We have a pavilion dedicated to research and creativity. When we talk about research, it's about researcher, scientist, and creativity. It's the same thing, but it's for artists and culture. So this place is for, there is a 200 meter specialized to residencies of artists and scientists to work together. There is also common spaces like a living lab. It means a place for experiments, for people to try new devices of the culture, for museum and so on. There is an auditorium where people can go. It could be non-profit organization for events. We have exhibition spaces. So it means that you don't need to be well known to try your first exhibition there, but you can also be well known. There is artistic training spaces. So it means that maybe if people want to see how creation is working, is building, maybe some people, the audience can come during the creation. There is a co-working space for free for students, especially for students who want to start a new business in the creative industry. And there is a brewery. So you see there is a lot of traps. We hope, and it's open to everyone. It means that if you have nothing to do in the Villa Creative, the house of creation, we will come in the garden, because there is 3,000 square meter of garden. So you can come to take a coffee with your own sandwich, and you see, oh, there is an exhibition. Oh, I can try something in the living lab and everything. And we hope that people will connect. And in a few words, you will see that, look good. In a few words, what I can say that what is difficult is not people to cross, it's people to meet. And we have an idea of how it will work, but we don't know. So one thing important is that we gave us the chance to fail and to try again. And I think that being a space from a university, we have this opportunity to try these new models of working together, this new business model also, and we have maybe more time that we would have if we were a non-profit organization with really tough for people, for benevoles, and it's difficult to work for a long time. And when you're a company, you need to have cash every year. So we need this cash, but we have 4 or 5 years to fail and try again. And maybe it's what is interesting in this project is that it's the opportunity to be helped in the beginning of this project by the government on different grants. But in 4 years, we had to be autonomous without grants and anything. So I think it's a big opportunity that gave us the government to have this building for free for some years to try this project. Maybe for the beginning it's okay. I can stop there.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Pierre. I'm just going to go back here. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker. She is actually one of our UK speakers, and I would like very much to introduce Carol Bell, OBE. Carol is a freelance consultant and the Associate Regional Director for Creative UK. So throughout her career, she has developed and delivered many complex capital and revenue, cultural and creative sector projects. She was also, as Newcastle Gate's head director of major festivals and events, Carol has led and has implemented on a number of successful initiatives, including Newcastle Gateshead's successful bid to host the Great Exhibition of the North, which resulted in Newcastle and its partner town Gateshead being listed by the Rough Guide as the #1 place to visit in the world in 2018. That's pretty big, yeah. Content created focused on showcasing the region's strengths and innovation and creativity, commissioning a range of content using digital, AR and VR technology. She was awarded an OBE in 2019 for services to the cultural sector across the Northeast. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. I think we're going down sort of in age, so it's going to be quite interesting when we get to you. Because my notes I'm going to kind of talk about my reflections in relation to career paths and the opportunities, I think, that are quite exciting now, despite the challenges, and I think Tom and I have shared some stuff. So, yeah, in the probably not so olden days when I started my career in the cultural sector, we kind of tended to talk about industry and denoted one thing, and that was about making stuff, physical stuff that was manufactured somewhere or dug up or wrangled together using machinery that made probably quite a lot of noise. And, you know, it was made in a building with a regular workforce that would clock in and clock out at the end of the day. And they produced hard, tangible things like ships, cars, computers, household appliances. And they also looked after physical infrastructure, and obviously they still do that today to an extent. I don't know if we speak for the rail companies today in terms of being on strike, but obviously I support them, but anyway, that's another story. And those things obviously still happen, but then industry wasn't someone who sat in a cafe with a laptop designing and testing a new video game. It wasn't a fashion designer collaborating with a chemist on a new high-tech self-cleaning fabric or a TV series about the monarchy. And it certainly wasn't anything connected to virtual worlds using artificial intelligence or augmented reality. And I think happily now, and it's been really interesting in terms of thinking about career paths, it means something entirely different. It's a bit quieter, possibly less labour intensive, and I think that's because our raw materials are not just coal, steel, oil, they're ideas, and that's something which I think is really exciting. An investment, if you think about it, to tangible IP, that actually overtook investment into tangibles after the recession in 2008. But you probably wouldn't know that if you looked at the business sections today in our national press. And I really believe that, you know, creativity and the many facets of the creative sector, whether you're an artist, an architect, a games or fashion designer or a writer, are really key careers that significantly drive the economy. And what's really interesting is, for the first time ever, and I don't know what Tom thinks or others, it's becoming less and less of a secret. So it's really great to talk about it and champion the UK's creative sector and talk about its wider role in our economy and the opportunities in the not too distant future that exists for them to play, I think, an even bigger role in driving not just national, but I think regional economic stability and also strengthening our sense of place. I think in the notes that went out to promote this event, it talked about the creative sector booming, and I can't remember whether it's 116 or 19 billion to the UK's regional economy, the UK's economy, and I think, you know, we're one of the fastest pre-pandemic, we were one of the fastest growing sectors, much bigger than, I think there's probably sort of lots of anecdotes going about saying, you know, we're bigger than car manufacturing and the financial services combined, but also I did another interesting stat the other day. We're also bigger than the fishing industry as well in terms of the amount of productivity that we generate. Oops, sorry, my notes have gone a bit haywire, so just give me a second. So although the creative sector's booming, and the last budget announcement, the creative sector was identified as a priority growth area for government, I think there's a really interesting point, which I think might be something that we all talk about. we need to generate that pipeline of talent to continue to feed the sector. So the jobs that I talked about that exist now, which didn't exist 20 years ago, will start to continue to be generated. And I think the only way that the UK can reach future potential, and if the UK really wants to level up, regenerate towns, cities and rural areas, then culture and creativity has to be at the heart of these plans. And I kind of think it might be, but there may be some lip service, and that, again, is something we can discuss. And one of the things I did want to make the point about that I do think is exciting, because I've worked in the industry for quite a long time now, and I was saying to Marta, it's kind of gone a bit like that. I think that devolution is a really, really exciting opportunity to recalibrate the ecosystem. And I've got some notes, which I'll probably not go into, but I just want to tell a story. In the northeast, where I've kind of spent most of my time, it's gone like that. So when I started working in this sector and doing the big events that Marta talked about, we had tons of money, and I remember commissioning Tom for the first time, and it was a really exciting time, and for the first time people were really starting to do really interesting things with culture. We had the Sage Gateshead, which is a brilliant music centre, Baltic, lots of cultural institutions which have transformed the city. And there was lots of investment. And then we got to 2010 and there was a change of government and the RDAs disappeared, who were doing a lot of that regional work. And everybody went, oh, we've done culture. And it became really tough for about 10 years. And then things started to change again. But now we've got devolved governments in the north, you know, so the Manchester Combined Authority, South Yorkshire, the north of Tyne, and also the northeast is coming when they take on a wider devolution in 2024, March 2024. What's exciting about that is that culture and creativity is front and centre in a lot of their economic priorities. So that's a really exciting opportunity that I think is something to watch out for. But also, there needs to be a lot of thought behind that in terms of what people do, because coming back to the opportunities for businesses and career paths and innovations and collaborations with universities and all of that, all of those things need to happen in order for us all to have a really vibrant sector. And the Levelling Up white paper, which came out, I think, 2022, really highlighted the inequalities that exist. And I think in terms of creative productivity in London is something, it's massive. It's about 30% and it's 3% in the north. So again, you know, there's things changing, but lots more to happen. Sorry. And yeah, so I kind of just want to end there. I think there's an opportunity, and that might be something that we could talk about. And only this week, I think yesterday, there's probably a couple of things that happened to me this week. On Thursday, I was at a meeting in Leeds talking about the idea of the creation of a northern creative corridor. And, you know, that is about coming up with an idea to support business growth for the creative sector and putting a pitch to government linking the combined authorities. So brilliant, but again, the devil is also in the detail. But also showing that that sort of devolution and that activity can make a difference. And I don't know if anyone was listening to Radio 4 this morning, and it was good timing. And I think Sir Jim O'Neill, who's chair of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, was on talking about the difference that devolution has made in the Manchester Combined Authority area. And I think for the first time in relation to productivity, Manchester is outstripping London, which is brilliant. And it's not about them and us. I think it's about looking at levelling up for the whole of the country. And I think, again, I'll finish by saying, you know, the creative industries are a growth area with limitless possibilities, and the sector makes money. It creates jobs. And many jobs that don't exist today. When I started out working, you know, such as games designers or VR, didn't exist then. And creative innovators also have the capacity to tackle some of society's greatest problems as well through collaboration with other people. But more importantly, or just as importantly, creativity makes people feel better. It binds communities together and gives them a sense of pride and place. And I think we've been through an extremely disruptive few years. But I think throughout history, periods of intense change, upheaval and unrest are usually followed by great cultural and technological advancements. So let's just watch this space. Thank you.
I'm just going to introduce our next speaker. Thank you, Carol. Our next speaker is Tom Higham. Tom is the creative director and founder of Mediale, an independent arts charity and agency based in Selby. They work with artists, developers, designers, and arts organizations and policymakers all over the world to curate and produce ambitious artworks and creative projects. Tom is an experienced curator and producer of ambitious art projects and interested in the enabling power of digital technology. He's inspired by creating well-considered, simple and effective projects with something to say. He's deeply committed to the development of arts, culture and creative technology in the UK and the North in particular.
Thank you very much. And just to start by saying what a privilege it is to be on this panel. Firstly, I'm going to move to Avignon. I don't know about anybody else. And secondly, to thank Carol, who's almost single-handedly responsible for the beginning of my career in the Northeast and running Culture 10. So thank you, Carol. Where to start? So it's a Saturday lunchtime. It's sunny outside. Pride's going on all over the city. And so our job is to make talking about cultural investment interesting and engaging. So I'll just give you a little bit of background to what Mediale is and why we do what we do. So we develop, produce, exhibit and tour art projects by artists working in the UK, particularly in North Yorkshire and working internationally as well. We support artists who are working in the margins and in the grey spaces between art and science, between visual arts and music, between technology and innovation, and we try to create kind of catalysing projects that can help artists to kind of move on and build sustainable careers and lives in the creative sector. So a quote I always reference, which is by my mentor, Anna Harja, who now works in Singapore. She always used to say that artists use the tools we have to explore, prototype and test our possible futures so that we can make better decisions. And I say that because I fundamentally believe that art is important inherently and in and of itself, but also in the effects it can have on society and on our culture. There's so much conversation in cultural investment about economic and intrinsic to instrumental kind of effects of investing in culture. Is it because of bed nights in hotels and jobs created? Is it because of social cohesion and arts and well-being and kind of community pride? What's the rationale for investing in culture? And we seem to have this big pendulum in the UK and I think in a lot of the Western world that swings from one to the other kind of with the political winds. It's all of those things. But my passionate sort of plea is that if we only, current political climate notwithstanding, if we only invest in culture because of jobs and gross domestic product and straight up economic rationales, we ignore the many plural social, psychological, community and environmental impacts of cultural investment and vice versa. So what I sort of wanted to note for today is again in the kind of description of the panel, we were kind of referenced the Pass Culture programme in France, which invests about €260 for every single 18-year-old in France for cultural access. Okay, that combined with the relaunch fund post-COVID, which is about €2 billion. And just as a comparison for that, and not to shame any Arts Council staff who might be watching this or hopefully aren't in the room, it's not their fault, but the Arts Council portfolio in the UK that supports arts organisations is £446 million. So less than a quarter of just the relaunch fund in France. The Arts Council investment by place, if you live in the City of London, i.e. very central London, they spend about £698 per person per year on culture. If you live in Selby, where my organisation is based, the Arts Council spend £1.64 per year per person. So that's the sort of disparities we're talking about, and that's not just to shame the UK system, but sometimes the reality takes a bit of time to catch up with the rhetoric. And I think there's a really exciting opportunity at the moment in terms of the hard data around the scale and impact of the creative economy and of culture, but also that needs to catch up with policy and with decision making and investment. So in terms of the next generation of artists and creative professionals and where next for them, going on to education. So again, another of the notes for today's panel was around the reduction of investment in creative subjects in the education system, and also the recent kind of clickbait headlines of "let's everybody do maths, that'll sort us all out." A friend of mine that shall remain nameless had a meeting recently with a schools minister who shall remain nameless, but I'm sure you can put two and two together. And he runs a creativity and education company, and they are amazing, really, really progressive. And he sat down with his schools minister, and as they were entering the meeting room and sitting down, the minister said to him, not knowing what the meeting was about, because he hadn't read his notes, I said, do you know what the problem is at the moment? This obsession with creativity in education is absolute nonsense. That's the context we're dealing with. That's the reality of the situation politically and therefore in terms of policy. There's no question that the creative economy is the fastest growing part of the UK economy. It's where jobs are coming from and where jobs are being created. In the education system now, in the university system, in the higher education system, and also in the school system, we're training people and educating people for jobs that don't exist yet and won't exist by the time they enter the employment market, the labour market. There's a real shift required, I think, in the fundamental way that education works in the world that we live in at the moment. As I went through, albeit it was some time ago, late in the last century, as I went through my education, so much of it was about absorbing as much information as possible, holding it in my head until I could regurgitate it onto a piece of paper and then be given a grade for that. That's not how the world works. So why is that the barometer for how we train and educate the next generation? It just seems like it needs another look that's perhaps, since the Industrial Revolution, for example, we could maybe look at changing things. In terms of place, there's an enormous opportunity and there's so many examples all around the UK, all around France, all around the Western world, when places invest in culture and the transition it can have in all aspects of the societies that it's in. Not just in terms of cultural regeneration, which was a lot of the rationale around Carol's work in the North East and my benefiting from that, but also just in terms of cultural identity, in terms of employment opportunities, in terms of progressing society. And the triple bottom line, which is an established economic premise of social, environmental and economic outputs, is something that the arts does very well and needs to articulate better to central government. For a little example here, I don't think, somebody might disagree with me and I'd be happy to talk to them about it, but I don't think Google moved to King's Cross because of the quality of the schools and the low crime rate. I think they moved to King's Cross because of the vibrant centrality to a cultural life that place encourages and fosters. There's a real requirement to move past culture-led regeneration to just culture-led places, I believe. So I think the opportunity is enormous. I think progressive investment is partly political, but it's on us to articulate our offer and what we can actually change in society through investment in culture. And it feels like an exciting moment to be working in this field. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to introduce our last speakers now. Shall I introduce you, both of you? Yeah? Okay. So I am delighted to introduce our last two speakers from France, Kelly Paulme and Keti Irubetagoyena. Thank you. So Kelly joined the kitchens of La Mirande. That made me very hungry, by the way, when I was reading this. A Michelin star hotel restaurant in Avignon as an apprentice pastry chef. She then advanced to join the Hotel de l'Europe, another Michelin star restaurant in Avignon. In 2013, she left France for Oceania, where she traveled for 4 years. Here, she worked as pastry chef again at the Astrolab. She also took advantage of a long period of work in the Australian bush to explore cooking meat over a wood fire, using techniques she learned from indigenous people. On her return, she became head pastry chef at the gastronomic restaurant La Bohème in Cheshire in the UK, where she rediscovered the classics of French pastry. Unfortunately, a surgical accident disabled her right arm, pushing her to reinvent her practice. So she moved to Creuse to resume her studies and open a traveling canteen where she now revisits traditional cooking, which she embellishes with flavors brought back from her travels. At the same time, she is enrolled, she's very busy, she is enrolled in a master's degree in English, identity and cultural transfers, and dedicates her thesis on conviviality in Anglo-Saxon countries. Last but not least is Keti. Keti is a director and teacher and director of research at the Conservatoire National Supérieur d'Art Dramatique, PSL. She holds a doctorate on the stage presence of dramatic performance, a field of study she continues to explore within the framework of stage research laboratories. Since 2010, she has developed her work in the form of cycles, carried out in close collaboration with various artists, authors, photographers, musicians, chefs, etc. Each cycle explores a social issue over a long period of time through plays, research projects, and meditation experiences. She is also an associate of artist at La Meta, Centre Dramatique National Poitiers Nouvelle Aquitaine. So thank you very much. The floor is all yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very, very happy and honored to share this panel debate with all of you. So thank you very much. As Marta said, I'm an artist researcher in the field of theater. I'm a director and I'm also head of research at the Conservatoire National Supérieur d'Art Dramatique, which is one of the national drama schools in France, based in Paris. For the past 10 years, the CNSAD is part of the PSL University. And so, as head of research, I work with the PSL SACRE laboratory, which is dedicated to practice-based research on art and design. This laboratory brings together professional artist researchers and students from master to PhD level, and students and artists who work on music, theater, architecture, cinema, photography, literature, design, etc. And its main aim is to sustain research projects carried out by artists and also to encourage collaborations between art and science. As an example, one of the CNSAD's current PhD students, who is a Greek stage designer, has been working for 2 years with another PhD student from the ENSAD, it's École Nationale Supérieure des Arts Décoratifs. Donc another PhD student who is specialized in XR, extended reality, and together they especially explore how using virtual reality headsets influence the work of actors and actresses on stage. So obviously it's a very, very specific research, but I think it's also a really interesting one and a fruitful partnership. As far as I'm concerned, I'm very, very far from being an XR expert, but I'm convinced that breaking down barriers between practices or disciplines, such as I do, is one of the ways to renew and boost creative industries today. As I can see, discussing or even working with, for example, specialists in the experimental sciences, encourage artists to broaden their fields of research. It sharpens their curiosity. They sometimes show more ambition, and they are more concerned about sharing outside the inner circle of their peers. And on the other side, I believe that artist researchers can bring to the other scientists a high capacity to think differently, to imagine utopias, to think what is still unthought, and I'm also convinced that it's absolutely necessary today in order to find solutions for tomorrow. So at least, and certainly because I work in this transdisciplinary context of the PSL University for 5 years now, that's what I can experience for myself as an artist researcher. In fact, as Marta said, all my work is the fruit of collaborations with other universes, sometimes far removed from the art world. Since 2019, for example, I work around the term eating, exploring it through shows, scenic experiences with actors and actresses, and performances. My last work was on pooping, eating pooping, and I worked with another artist researcher in the field of literature, Olivia Rosenthal, who is a famous author in France. And together we have led a long survey, meeting scientists, chatting with common people, and reading a lot of documents. And now we are proposing a performance conference to share all this knowledge and to encourage, to invite people to talk about that, because we both think that the taboo surrounding this everyday act is a major problem of our days, both in terms of the relationship with our bodies and from an ecological point of view. And to conclude and to introduce my partner, our next project will also explore the transition from the intimate to the collective, since it will focus on the meal. Its subject will be how do we welcome people around the act of eating, and starting from here, how the fact of sharing food can also be the best way to share ideas. Thank you.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us today. Thank you very much. It's my first round table. So. And I'm Keti Paulme. I'm pastry chef for 12 years. And for 4 years, I collaborate with Keti around the eating thematic. Our new project will explore the art of the table, a subject that I know well, because all my background, like Marta says, come from Michelin-starred restaurant and gastronomic restaurant. I travel a lot and I've been overseas for working a lot, so I had the opportunity to meet people and to see a multitude of culture. So it was like building me on the way. This project with Keti was born a few months ago when Keti and I decided to meld our two specialties, theater directing for her and gastronomy for me. Therefore, we decided to lead a survey about the art of the table in the aim to explore the notion of conviviality through the creation of diner performances. At the end of the year, we'll be invited to La Maison Française d'Oxford as part of the French Embassy Lumière programme. to do some research around the ritualization of dinner and the differences between France and the UK from a comparative point of view. I don't know if it's working the same in York University or other university, the same way as Oxford. What we discover about Oxford University is that it's divided in 39 colleges with their own rules and rituals. Official dinners are subject to a certain types of codes. It is very interesting for us as French to be introduced in this type of practice, which doesn't exist in France. What we heard about these official dinners is that scientists from every origin can meet and share, so there is an effective porosity between all types of research. It seems clear that this time of commensality is also a time of questions themselves about their own subjects and perspectives. It is with this idea that we want to start this creation residency. It will be a time for meeting people, getting our inspiration from the architecture and, of the town, and collecting interviews from historians, anthropologists, literature specialists, and many more, maybe many more. With Keti, we will try to create an environment that represents what we discover at Oxford, but also what we know already. Well, it's not a secret that French gastronomy is the jewel of our culture. By mixing our sense of culinary art and the English welcoming, we want to tackle this idea of commensality and conviviality. Therefore, the dinner performance will be the mirror of our town spent in Oxford, following certain types of codes and rules. The menu served will also be inspired by people met and by the experiences lived. The flywheel will be directly connected with the conversation subjects and the speeches made by the scientists. So we'll try to see how it's possible to create a bubble, a space where food is in accordance with dialogue. In fact, too often we observe that the dichotomy between the two, especially in university context or in context of sharing knowledge. We are convinced that a convivial space can increase our capacity to listen and to share with others. We commonly say that sharing is caring, but sharing is also increasing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for these all very interesting talks. So the format now will be that we're going to take questions from the audience, from yourselves. And we have mobile microphone here.
Thank you, that was absolutely fascinating. I so agree with Tom's point about the nature and the construct of our education system. So I guess I'm addressing it to all of the panel, but I'm really interested in the situation in France in terms of a public narrative that questions through the media almost on a daily basis the value of arts and humanities education, and whether that is your experience in France or whether it's quite different, and what can we learn from you in terms of reframing a narrative around the nature and importance of arts and culture through the education system as being the bedrock of a civilized society. She said working in a university.
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear the French perspective as well. I just agree that we've kind of given up on the argument in the UK a little bit, because I think that's our fault, the cultural sector's fault. Like, I think it's too easy to blame the politics. I think we've sort of given up on making the case properly.
I think it is starting to change again. I think you know, because obviously skills and education and career paths, people are banging on it about it. I mean, it's going up the agenda, but I think it is important in terms of, you know, and this conference roundtable I was at on Thursday was talking about the importance of collaboration and, you know, working with universities in relation to, you know, raising the profile of arts and humanities subjects and how important they are. But obviously there's also another issue, which is those young people who don't go to university and don't have the opportunity. So, you know, I think you've got to tackle both problems as well. But yes, I mean, I think I'm interested to hear a bit more in relation to, you know, what is happening in France, because we talked in the green room about, I've forgotten the name of the award that young people get, the 200 and however 260
The Pass Fund, right?
Which is open to all young people to spend this money on any cultural activity they want to. So they can buy books, they can go to the theatre, they can go to a music concert. You know, so it'd be interesting to get your perspective on that in terms of whether you think that will or has made a difference.
I think it's a very good opportunity for young people, especially because it's for everybody, which is and they have the choice to go to the music concert, to buy books, to go to the cinema, theater, museums. So it's a wider audience also, and because we working in France with like a cultural industry to decentralize from Paris, we try, which is not perfect. It's not like something, but we try very much to go in the countryside and to see where we live. It's very culturally poor, but it's trying to invest on that every year. So it's it's a good thing, and the government try to highlight the culture, but in the same time, it's a certain type of culture. So it's going, like I say, it's going 2 steps forward and sometimes 1 step backward. So it's kind of like judging everything.
Yeah, for me it's difficult to be inside the past culture and to analyze it, but it's both a good thing, I think, and a bad thing. The difficulty is that young people that don't have the reflex to go to cinema or to theater want to do it more because there is this money. It's you have to think there are young people that don't have this culture to love culture, and so it won't solve this problem. But as I said to Tom, I have seen that teachers in schools are really interested in this system. So I think it will help to go with your class to theater, to see movies, etc. But it's not. I think the French government did that, and it's very nice. Just a precision: it's not all the young people, and the little ones don't have the past culture. It's from the college. College is from 14, I think. But the government is also cutting money.
Budget?
Money budgets.
On education, for example.
On education. So it's not perfect.
It's a good step.
It's a step.
Maybe last thing is it's difficult because we don't really know how it works really here in UK, but there is different things. I think there is a big impact of non-profit organization, and these non-profit organizations work for most of them without money, without grants. It's only people who want it. I don't know how it works here. If there is a lot of non-profit organization everywhere, and I know in France there is a lot, really a lot. In Avignon, it's a little a little town, really a little town. But because, or thanks to the festival, is now a European, well-known theater festival. It's incredible to see that there is the whole year, not only in July, but in the whole year, during the whole year, there is more theater and cultural exhibition than in the town of Nizza, who is, I don't know, maybe 10 times bigger than than Avignon. So it's because there is something really strong. It's a kind of totem, I don't know, a flag. We can say here. Here is theater, but not only. You come because it's theater, and then there is a lot of culture, and then there is a lot of non-profit association. Why? Because all the people, by a door or by another door, they have to deal with culture. So non-profit organization, there is a lot. And one of them is called the, if I translate, the Culture Journée. And it's, okay, let's go to see a museum on street art or anything. They build their program together with the young people, and they have fun. That's just it. They have fun. And then I can't say it's everywhere the same in France. What I see in Avignon is that when it works, it's because the young people find things they know and they like, street art, in the les bibliothèques, libraries of the public libraries. Okay, there is stuff they know. There is a lot of manga. It's not our European culture, but if it's the way for the young people to come because it's free to get them, they will see also other things. It's a trap once again. It's honeypot. I think honeypots are it would be my advice for today. It's a way to improve things.
I'm just going to, mindful of the audience, I was like, is there anybody who wants to follow up on what's been said? Or? Yeah.
It's most of us live in York, and obviously we're thinking about how this could be applied to York, I think. And there are quite a few very interesting festivals that are happening at the moment. I'd just like to ask, for those of you who maybe have come for the first time, what practical advice would you give, given that obviously our government is not very far-sighted? I think Tom has outlined that, but we do have the council who are excited by festivals. We have the university who are very ambitious in this field. What practical ideas would you have to really raise the flag in York in the way that you're talking about the flag being raised and the honeypots in Avignon?
Shall I start? I mean, I don't think there's a simple answer. Well, there is a simple answer. I think it's about being ambitious and really shouting about what you're doing. And I think going back to the point Tom made, I mean, yes, you have to make economic arguments, but talking about the benefits in a broad way, which is what certainly festivals and events do. I mean, one of the things I worked in them for many years and did all sorts of weird and wacky things, and we'd run amazing food festivals, which we were talking about, and I think they achieve so many benefits, and I think it is about shouting about them. I was talking to the director of DocFest, and this is an event in Sheffield, a documentary documentary film festival, and it's happening in a couple of weeks' time. And it's known better in Europe than it is known in Sheffield. And I think it is that thing about you taking your assets in a serious way, supporting Tom and championing what he does.
Thanks, Carol.
and the Festival of Ideas, and really thinking about the things that are different, that don't happen anywhere else, and obviously also in terms of the amazing sort of heritage assets that York has got as well. And I think in the past, I mean, I came here because I know Portia, and she invited me to come and speak today. We worked together in the past around light festivals, and York used to have a really brilliant one, and I think it is, what are the things that you could do here that is different? And I'm sort of going to embarrass my friend Carol, who's in the audience today, because we were chatting about where she lives. And she was telling me, which I thought was amazing, that young people in their village town, are you a town or a village, Carol? Are proud to be in the brass band. That's fantastic, and it's cool. So I think it is about, you know, being proud of the things that are quite special and unique to your place, and you know, making them, you know, doing things a bit differently. I mean, we once built Newcastle Gateshead out of cake and then put it in a park and then everybody ate it, and it was one of the best events I ever did. It was great fun. Sorry, that was just...
Thank you. Any?
I feel like I'm biased, so because I know York too much, probably not best spoken to it. But just to come back on what Carol was saying there, like the investment that and the programs that Carol kind of oversaw in Newcastle Gateshead, has changed that place permanently. Like genuinely permanently. It was ambitious. It was a chunk of money after going for capital of culture, but it's changed the entire region, and it's changed the economy of the region, it's changed the population of the region, it's changed both universities in the city of Newcastle. And so like these things take time but can actually make change. And so it's the kind of uniqueness, as Carol was saying, of when DocFest being better known in Europe, Mediali started as a festival, and it was always better known in London than it was in York, always, and always more respected in London than it was in York. Even to the extent to which I gave a talk in the first festival in 2018 to an agency in the city, and somebody put a hand up and said, well, if this is a festival in York, why aren't all the artists not from York? Which is a valid question on one level, but at the same time, if we just show the same things that everybody sees all the time in a circle, and nobody ever looks outwards, then where are we going to go? Like, what about bringing in world-leading artists to work with people here to open up the world and raise things better? So, yeah, that's my little rant.
Yeah.
I'd like you to, first of all, I'd just like to thank you very much. It's been a really interesting debate. I'd like you to shout me down now, because I don't understand why, when France allows an awful lot of money into the arts, much more than we get here. You talked about 2 billion, I think, and 260 euros per student. Is that per year after 14? Yeah. Which is an enormous sum compared with what Tom's been telling us about the UK. And yet the UK comes out in terms of its sort of creative industry output towards the top of the tree. And I don't understand that contradiction. So if you can enlighten me on that, that would be fantastic. And perhaps I'll leave the second question till afterwards.
I can start with that, and I think Tom probably also chip in. And I think, yes, I did start to talk about that. You know, the creative sector is booming, but a bit like levelling up. It's booming in parts of the UK, and also it's booming with certain people in the UK, a certain sort of demographic. A lot of the people who are high in the creative sector, and I'll put my Geordie accent on, are people that have had public school and middle class and are well educated. And one of the things I was going to say, but I also didn't want to steal Tom's thunder, is that if we want to grow more and have a really diverse creative economy, we've got to be able to give the opportunity to those people, and especially those young people who don't see themselves as wanting a creative career, not being for them. And again, I sort of give a bit of a personal anecdote, but again, it is going back years. But I will go back to education. And when I was growing up, none of my family had ever gone to university, and my parents were kind of working class, sort of slightly, more affluent. And I really liked art at school, and I really, really, really liked it. I loved it and was really passionate about it. And I went to school in Gateshead, and they ran a scheme where they were doing a public art scheme, and Chris will know about it, where they had sculptors who were doing public art in Gateshead, and the last thing was obviously the Angel of the North, one of the most famous things. What they did was got those artists to come and work in schools, and that was the first time I'd ever met an artist, and I was like, what you mean you make a career out of this? And I remember going home and saying to my mum and dad that I wanted to go to art college, and they kind of went, oh, okay, we'll support you, and they were brilliant. So I went to art college in Lincoln, and it was too far south, so I decided to come back north. Went to university in Northumbria, which was brilliant, and they did a brilliant degree which taught you how art worked in society, and then I obviously the rest is history. But that opportunity doesn't exist for so many people, and there are so many talented people out there that just don't see that, they can work in the BBC if they want to. They can, get involved in, they could be the director of the Sage Gateshead or the Barbican, or so that's kind of why. Yes, we recognise it is booming, but it's still unequal, and I think we need to rebalance that. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah, no, I agree completely, and maybe just to that kind of discrepancy you described, maybe it's part of our problem that it's booming despite lack of support rather than because of clever support. So it's easy to kind of politically dismiss it. Stormzy, Ed Sheeran, I don't know.
Sam Fender, not today.
Sam Fender, Steve McQueen, people like that have grown their practice despite no support, not because of intelligent support. So we see these kind of British culture is world leading in some aspects, and there's incredible potential, but just if we invested in it more cleverly and more in certain areas, that could really drive our economy forward. York's a really interesting example of that. York has two fantastic universities, this festival being put on by one of them, who both have a ton of really impressive creative and arts related courses and programs, that some of which Marta runs. But jobs in York, there's a lot of people, when you leave this event and go and get your flat white or your sandwich, you'll be served by somebody who's doing a PhD or who has a PhD in AI and creative technology. That's a problem for the city in the long term. And no amount of beautiful buildings or nice parks hides that problem. It's coming over the horizon. So I do think that we've got to make the case better for investment.
Thank you. Is there any...
Thanks, Stephen, for deferring about your second question. But could I cheapen the debate a bit by talking about politics? And I'm really not wanting to introduce Brexit into the argument. But, as the person responsible for York as a UNESCO creative city, we're in contact with 290 odd cities, and 22 of them are cities with a similar sort of profile and expertise in some ways to York. One of the things you quickly realise is how different are the schemes for support around the world when you're looking at the global south and the way it regards culture and creativity. It genuinely is another world. But one of the things that's been really fascinating since 2016, or since we left, is the way in which Europe has moved on to reposition culture and creativity philosophically at the level of government and multinational cooperation. So we, on looking into this armoured glass bubble at the new European Bauhaus now, we see colleagues in cities in Europe doing collaborations in areas that we could now only dream of. I think perhaps only one or two UK cities have figured out how to get into or part of the Bauhaus project. That was sponsored so publicly by Ursula von der Leyen that told you the culture was being thought of very differently there. And the key to that lay in a debate about the fourth pillar. This is quite a recondite area of policy, but so culture is like the economy. It is as important as the economy, rather than being part of the economy. And that shift in thinking really means that you have to take cultural rights seriously, which the UK in theory does. So one of the things I'd really want to ask the panel about is the relationship between culture as a right, something we all have the right to express ourselves, the right to see ourselves reflected in the cultural infrastructure that surrounds us, and how you think France is doing there, and how you think perhaps the UK is doing on that front. I'd also say, because I pay tribute to the University of York, not just for bringing these issues out, but also for the Centre for Applied Human Rights, which has spotted the way in which culture can be part of its human rights work, and is currently instrumental in bringing artwork from around the world into York, in a way which we hope will live up to the legacy of Mediale and what came before. So the question is really about human rights and culture as part of that.
Anybody?
Interested to hear the French perspective.
Yeah. Maybe because we don't see culture in the same, like we try to always exchange. That's what Pierre with the Villa Créative in Avignon and Keti with PSL. We try to do link with science and culture, and it's maybe that it's something that is always moving. And European, obviously, the European, the hat is helping as well, because we get like funding from the European community, and there's like some exchange as well. So basically with the university we can move and doing some like program with others, and it's moving. And after, if it's different, I don't know. It's a good question, but I know that it's like this investing, like Europeans are investing a lot in culture, because it's also a way to I always like to highlight what Europe brings as well. But they're investing also in science, and they try to meet, like at the moment they're really trying to link all the two, science and culture. That's really I will say the goal at the moment. Yeah. So I don't know if it's really replying the question, but I'll try. Yeah.
It's tough. From France, it's difficult. There is a lot of money. For example, for the Villa Créative, we have 15 million euros for the makeup of a 19th century building. But why? Because it's a building of France. The owner is France, so it has to take care about his buildings. So when we have the project to say, okay, now how will it work? The day-by-day economy of the building. Go by yourself. So there is the money for the building for culture, but for everyday life of this building we have to deal with. So we talked about creative economy, creative industry, and creative sector. As you can see, one is the part of the other. There is a lot of money until 2030. It's a big French program, but it's because the government and Europe is trying to find growth levers. I think it's the translation for the growth, economic growth of the whole Europe and countries. But it's like when you do, I think it's now that I know better culture and art day by day, I know there is a lot of connection with research. Maybe there is a lot of money for development and innovation. And am I talking about science or am I talking about art and culture? The same. It's difficult to find money for fundamental research. And there is fundamental research in creativity, artists and everything. And it's difficult in France to find money for that. So, how can we do? Because now when we work in innovation, in culture, development of products, on new devices of culture, you find money. But it's not only the only part of the sector, of the cultural sector. So we thank you, universities, academies, to profit and industries are more and more connected with universities. But there is still a big work without research of something that earn money. So we have to connect industry with academy, not to pollute the academy, not to, but to for the artist, for the scientist, not to be afraid by money. It means that money is not my problem, but it's not my problem if I work with someone who will make money with maybe in 1 or 2 years with something I work on. And it means that what we have to think about in France, I think, is how fundamental research will provide money in the future, and a little part of this money will come back to the academy and to things that we don't even know if one day it will make money. And I'm not sure that the European Commission and the French government think about the things like this. I don't know. But we are trying to experiment new business model. We have a lab, a law lab and economic lab in the Avignon University, and we are focused on digital economy, digital property. You all heard about blockchain, NFT, and everything. Okay. What is really interesting fundamentally in this? If we work on some kind of open source development, collective development, we can have the possibility to know who worked on which part 2-3 years ago, and to have a kind of a distributed property, including academics, artists, electronics engineer, electronics amateur, everything. And one day, if it makes money, maybe it can go back. And it's something quite new in the field of science, in the field of culture, and in their connections. And I hope, I cross the finger about this, and it's one of my dreams. I hope we will have some events, some devices, some things in pure art, pure creativity, without trying to earn money with it. And in 1 or 2 years, maybe it will go in the industry. It will prepare a product or something, and with these new digital revolutions, we will be not only ahead, which is important for the connection between us, that between all of us in the European countries, and African also. I hope that there will be easier to work on non-profit project, but with maybe money that will come back later. I will finish with that. One point. It's a big problem that everyone encountered in the open source project. There is a lot of people who develop drones, 3D printers, open source, collaborative research or development, and one day said, this device is really, really good. Let's go to the market. Impossible, because it was a collective creation. And the rules wasn't clear in the beginning of the project. The blockchain was not ready to record in the network who work on what and this. But tomorrow, collective development, maybe will go on the market, and each person, individual, organization, maybe will have something, not only money, there is other ways, but we'll have something for him thanks to his participation to a collective project. And I think maybe it will change something in culture and arts because of the next connection there will be between all this revolution, green transition, societal evolution, numerical evolution, all goes together. I was a bit long, sorry.
Thank you. It's very interesting. We're running out of time, so just a quick, very quick.
Hiya. I think economics has been brought up a lot, and Tom earlier said about how cultural investment purely from an economic rationale, like GDP, could be potentially limiting to the full benefits of cultural investment. And I wondered how cultural investment, for example, the money given to young people, is valued and rationalized in France. Is it also higher up just seen as an economic investment? And also, what does the panel think of alternative metrics to GDP that could better reflect the benefits outside of purely the economic, for example, cultural, health and community benefits?
I'm not sure I well understood the question. It's a big question. Perhaps it's just because culture helps thinking. You talked about human rights, but culture helps increasing the attention to other people. So yes, I think that past culture will, if it continues, will help share culture all over the country. Because it's the same culture is not helped everywhere in France the same way. Perhaps it's just that helping culture is helping health, human rights, etc. But I don't know if in England you know that the health system in France knows a crisis now. So it's important for me to say that past culture is not perfect and France is far away from being perfect because we know a lot of problems today.
We're running out of time. Sorry, don't want to cut the answer short. But can I just have?
I think it's very important to have a matrix which gathers wider evidence than just economic benefit. I think we both agree on that. I don't think it's there yet, and I also think there's also a challenge because different organisations and cultural organisations nationally also evaluate things in different ways, so it's a bit messy. I think it needs to be tidied up, but I think it is so important to evaluate the intrinsic value of culture and creativity, because it isn't just about pounds of money or exchange.
So I just want to perhaps there is a tendency to want to tell the sort of positive story about the creative industries, and the best way of doing that is by saying numbers and jobs and figures, but that doesn't tell the whole story because it doesn't help measure what's going on, really. So it doesn't help people that want to get the money to do things. That's my 5 cents.
Maybe it's too easy to default to the numbers. I was struck by what Chris said about the kind of fourth pillar of culture as a sort of late-stage capitalism, end of capitalism kind of rationale. There's a semantics problem. There's an articulation and a storytelling problem. And if there's one sector that should be good at telling the story better, it's
So that's a nice way of finishing. We need a better way of telling the story about the creative industries, and we can discuss that. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm really sorry we've run out of time, so we don't have any more time for questions. But I just want to thank the panel here, Pierre, Carol, Tom, Kelly, and Keti. Thank you so much for all your contributions. Thank you to the audience for coming along and for asking really interesting and engaging questions, which is seen by the fact that we've run out of time. So thank you, everybody, and just enjoy a lovely day that we have outside. Thank you.
Thank you.